In this week's exciting chapter of Bleach, Nemu goes on the attack against Pernita, a certain Arrancar Espada returns, and Mayuri Koratsuchi defeats Pernita with the power of mad science. Holy crap, this week's chapter was brutal, amazing, surprising, and honestly one of the greatest chapters that I've seen from Bleach in quite some time. And it immediately opened up with some amazing action with Nemu, who just used the Gikan Jirinju against Pernita, which completely obliterated its arm. That was until suddenly, as she's falling out of the sky, its limbs started to regenerate, growing brand new fingers and eyeballs, which suddenly extended their nerves into Nemu's body and ripped her to shreds. I think it goes without saying at this point that Nemu is deader than shit. After reading last week's chapter, we got a lot of hints to the fact that Nemu was probably going to die. However, I didn't expect it to be so quick and so abrupt and so violent in this week's chapter. And honestly, I'm still kind of shocked by these turns of events. And this is going to lead to something really important later on, because is Mayuri just going to make another Nemu, or is he simply going to try and contain the memory of the one Nemu who actually grew up to be his daughter? It's really interesting, and right after her death, we get another big surprise from this week's chapter. We get to see the return of the Espada known as Xyle Opero Grans. That's right, he actually returns in this week's chapter, not so much physically. He's basically in Mayuri's head, basically just berating him and talking about how he shouldn't have dedicated his entire life to creating Nemu and how basically he shouldn't have attached himself to her perfection. Basically, this is very similar to the conversation they had during their battle, where he's basically sort of twisting it around on Mayuri this time. However, this is not going to get into Mayuri's head whatsoever. In fact, it only enrages him even more, and that's when he decides to go into the attack after destroying the image of Xyle Opero Grans. If there's one thing that Pernita should have learned when he was actually battling against Mayuri Koratsuchi, it was to not piss him off. And now that Mayuri is pissed, he's going to pull out all of the stops. What he does is, he actually tricks the hand into eating the remaining body parts of Nemu. Is going to cause him to constantly regenerate to a point where he's going to constantly bubble up and just explode. Think of it as Tetsuo from Akira. And that's pretty much the end of this week's chapter. So what's the rundown on this week's chapter of Bleach? Sweet Soul King of Sassafras, this was ridiculous. Such a violent, action-packed, and surprising chapter of Bleach, which again made great use of its artwork and its character design. The opening scene with Nemu actually attacking the hand was awesome. It looked really cool, especially when she was flying out of the sky. In fact, despite how creepy it is, my favorite panel from this week's chapter is when she's actually falling out of the sky in the top panel, and you see all of the fingers from Pernita just falling along with her, and then the panel right below that, it's the same exact thing, except that the fingers have started to regenerate. You can see the eyeballs opening up. You can see these other fingers, which are starting to pop up and regenerate from those other body parts. And then suddenly, boom, they just stick her from multiple angles with the nerves and just completely rip her to pieces. It's so freaking messed up, even by Bleach standards. I honestly don't think a Band-Aid's gonna help her in this situation. But aside from the action scene and the death of Nemu at the very beginning, and of course Mayuri finally going on attack at the very end of the chapter, the most surprising thing to me this week was getting to see the return of Xyle Opero. I just never thought that we would see that character again, because just like Nemu now, that guy is worm food. He is dead as crap, and honestly it was really great to see him return, because Mayuri hasn't really had any other like big battles with like any other mad scientists in the series, and Xyle Opero was sort of like that one character who was closest to that. And bringing him back, even though if it was just like in the head or it was just like a vision that he was seeing, I thought was really good, because in many ways it seemed like this was going to be the moment where Mayuri was basically just going to give up on the battle. But if anything, it completely fueled him to try and defeat Pernita, especially with the cool abilities where apparently it's eating like the brain of Nemu, and somehow that's going to affect its body to start transforming rapidly and constantly regenerating to a point where it literally cannot sustain its own body anymore, and it's just going to just explode in a mass of blood and awesomeness. We're just gonna have to wait and see what's gonna happen in the next chapter. I mean, for all we know, there could be another twist. There might be a way for Pernita to actually survive this, and if that happens, damn, Pernita is one of the strongest characters that we've seen in the series, and this is without a doubt one of the longest battles that we have seen in the series. And I honestly don't know what Mayuri would be able to do after this, because I think, honestly, if Pernita does survive this attack, I think his pride is going to be broken just a little bit. But that's the other thing. Just like the other villain characters that we've seen in the series who always have these extra tricks up their sleeve, Mayuri always has 10 tricks up his sleeve. So I really cannot wait to see what's going to happen and what the end result of this battle is going to be. If he's going to be able to regenerate Nemu, bring her back, or simply just make the 8th version of Nemu. We're going to have to wait and see. What I will say is everything about this week's chapter was on frickin' point. The action, the artwork, the amazing writing, especially when Xyle Opero appeared and he started berating Mayuri in the middle of the chapter. And of course, that big final scene with Pernita starting to blow up and explode. Just, so much awesomeness from this week's chapter. So I literally have no complaints about this week's chapter of Bleach. I thought it was just on point and a perfect read. So I'm going to give this week's chapter a 5 out of 5. Awesome action, Xyle Opero appearing, and what appears to be the death of Pernita, and possibly the real death of Nemu. Yes, we're just going to have to continue reading, but there it is. Perfect chapter of Bleach. Check it out, Bleach fans, especially if you've been following the manga version. If you haven't decided to read the manga because you're an anime fan, I highly recommend checking out this final arc of the series. It just manages to get crazier. So, I loved this chapter, but I want to hear from you guys. What did you think about the death of Nemu, the return of Xyle Opero, and of course, the final part of the battle with Mayuri and Pernita? Do you think he's actually going to be defeated? Do you think he's going to somehow regenerate a brand new body and continue to fight against Mayuri? Or do you think this is all just a big part of Mayuri's plan because he's a crazy mad scientist? And please tell me what you hope to see from the rest of the Bleach manga series. Please tell me in the comment section below. Thanks for watching, subscribe to the channel, follow us on social media, and make sure to check out our weekly podcast show, The Powerful Nerdcast. In this week's episode, we just did an interview with Carrie Means. He's the voice actor of Frylock from Aqua Teen Hunger Force. We also talk about video game addictions and a few other cool things like the Screw Attack death battles, so make sure to check that out. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.